Welcome to Wire Guild. This tutorial is for a framed Briolette pendant. However, you don't need to use a Briolette if you don't have one. You could use multiple beads. Now, materials I've used as normal 0.8mm or 18 gauge round wire, some 0.4 or 26 gauge, and I've got a Briolette. But like I say, if you just have some graduated beads, that will be fine. The first thing I'm doing is I'm actually rubbing my wire out. I want it to have a little bit more firmness than normal. So I do that by using a cleaning cloth and rubbing the wire. I tend to just buy dead soft and then I can make it into half hard if I want. I've got some little tiny black spinel beads which are only 2mm, so they're very tiny, but they are lovely for this kind of work. However, if you don't have anything like that, you could use the little glass beads, used for loom work. I'll show you what I mean. I've got a box just here. These and little glass ones, you can get thousands of these for pennies. So those would work just as well. But any tiny beads will work for making a framework, as long as I catch all the loose ones and put them out of the way. But I'm going to use these black spindles. The first thing I'm going to do is I've got a little tiny box lid here. I'm going to put some of my beads in the box lid because otherwise they will end up everywhere, and they're so tiny that I will lose them and they'll end up in the vacuum cleaner, when I stuck up. So I've just pulled some off the little wire that they're on here. Quite a few. I probably won't need anywhere near that many, but anyway. And then I'm just going to put a knot in this. There we go. Any that I have left over, I'll pop into a little Ziploc bag for using next time. Now these are teeny, and as you can see, there is no way that bead is going to go on that piece of wire. So we need a finer piece of wire. And I've got, this is a little old nest of 0.4mm sterling silver wire, which has got quite old and quite stiff and quite intractable. So I don't use it for much things. It goes on one side, and what I do is if I need something like this, which is going to be a central wire with fine beads on, I will use it for that. And I've taken myself probably, I don't know, maybe 8 inches, 9 inches of that. And this is my amethyst Briolette that I'm going to use. My Briolette is approximately 1 inch long. It's a little bit shorter than that, but it's near enough. So when it comes down to how much wire I'm going to make, I'm going to use 5 times the length of the bead. Now that's giving me 1 inch either side for creating the bail, and then 1.5 times the size of the bead. And I'm going to need 4 pieces of wire, 2 on either side, to create that frame. Just move these things out of the way. My frame's going to be created by having 2 pairs of 2 wires. And in that central gap in the middle will go this much thinner wire. Just pop it in the middle there. And then the beads will go on that. So I'm going to anchor that wire in place. So I'm holding with my left hand. I'm just going to put a little right angle bend in there, make my life easier. So hold the left hand and I'm wrapping with my right. Obviously, if you're left-handed, you'll do this the other way around. And I'm just wrapping 3 or 4 times around 2 of the heavier wires. So that's not going to go anywhere. Now I can thread one of my teeny tiny black spindles onto this finer wire. There we go. Now I want this wire at the moment is poking straight upwards. Obviously it has to lay parallel to the others. So just underneath I'm going to use my pliers again, and I'm going to put a bend in the wire so that that wire now lays down the length of the other 2 wires. Now then, I need some 0.4. Now the 0.4 that I'm going to use for this is not the sterling that I've just used down that middle. I'm actually using fine silver. It's much easier to work with. It's softer, it's more forgiving. It's just nicer to use. And I've probably got, I don't know, about 3 foot. So that would be about 1 meter. And in the center, so halfway along this length of wire, I am coming around the back of my 4 wires and my central wire. Let me just fiddle these ends out so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to take the wire that's on the right and I'm going to take it down. So I've gone over my 2 strong wires and over the fine wire that the bead is on. Now it's a little bit fiddly at first because it all wants to wriggle out of your hands, but just take it nice and slow. Don't pull too hard because we will pull from the other side. Turn it round. Now I'm going to go from this side, but in. That bead is too high, it needs to go down. So using my pliers at this stage before we get too tight, I can pop that bead in between the thicker wires because we want it more flush. We don't want it sitting on top. If we were sitting on top, we don't need to do all this. You could just wrap it on. So I'm taking my fine wire over the 2 frame wires, there we go, and over the thinner wire that my bead is fastened to. And then I'm going to come back. Okay, still wiggly, still unfirm. If you want to put some sticky tape on it, if that makes you feel safer, do that. But you can struggle. So I'm just going to push all this into place with my pliers. I'm going to thread another tiny bead onto the fine wire. If I can find the hole. It must be there somewhere. There we go. And slide that down. Now pick my wires back up and slide that bead into the gap between the thicker wires. I want these wires to lay flat. So a bit of fiddling. Push that in with my pliers and then take the top wire and I'm going to wrap it over the 2 frame wires and the wire that the bead's on. Then the wire from the bottom comes up, wraps around its 2 frame wires and the wire that the bead's on. There we go. Push those down. The more of these beads you get on, the firmer the whole piece is going to feel. It's only really fiddly when we start off with. So I need another bead. Little tiny one. Let's hope it's got a more obvious hole this time. Go on. There we are. Slide that down. And push it into place. Lovely. Go on. Top wire down over the 2 thicker wires that are on the edge and over the wire that's holding the bead. Wrap around and back up. Bottom wire up over the 2 frame wires and over the wire that's holding the bead. And pull down. You can tug quite tightly because although the wire that the bead's on is quite fine and it will pull it to the side, as soon as you put the other one on the other way, you're going to pull it back. So it doesn't really matter. Now, if you're using the glass beads that I showed you earlier, the ones that you can do the loom work with, you can probably actually slide those onto a piece that's a 0.8 wire or a 18 gauge, sorry, 20 gauge. So you can not use this finer wire, but the principle is exactly the same, even if you're using 5 wires that are all the same size, or whether you're like me, you're using 4 wires and a thinner one in the middle. Now I'm just gonna keep going, and you can see that I constantly play with it, straighten things up, straighten with the pliers. A lot of people tend to think that wire jewelry kind of happens magically, but you don't. You fiddle with it all the time, straightening it up, neaten it, tighten the wires, make sure that when you're doing a weave that you're watching it all the time. So I've got much further now. I have got further to go, but the piece is now quite firm, quite secure. So checking back on my bead, I know that I've got just about an inch. So to get a nice shape around the bead, I'm probably going to need about 3 inch. But just to make sure, and this is a good way of testing it at home, I've got some spare wire here, just a piece of old copper. And I'm going to make a shape around a pen. It's probably too fat, is this? But anyway, you'll get the idea. And then I can look and see what it looks like. So if I do it that big, as you can see, it's a bit too big. The balance isn't good there. So it needs to be a little bit tighter at the bottom and a bit closer together. Let's see how that looks. There. That looks more balanced. And it gives you an idea of what you're aiming for without you spoiling your silver or anything. So if I just get my pliers and I nip that wire together where it was touching, I now know that when I open it out is the length that I want my beaded area to be. And like I thought, it's about 3 inches. But this means that it doesn't matter what size bead you're working with, you will be able to work out, how much frame area you need. Now I'm going to keep going, adding my beads to the center wire and then wrapping the finer wires around over the top of them each time until I get to the point where I've got about 3 inches. At that point we will start and shape the frame for our little bead. I think I'll just cut this bit out. I don't think you need to see me wrap every bit. Here we go. So I've got to 3 inches, but my ends aren't even because I started fairly close to the end. So getting hold of one wire at a time, I'm just sliding it through. And the next one, slide. If it won't go straight away, grip with the end of the pliers. And can you see how I'm twisting my right hand? Backwards and forwards while applying pressure. Now don't pull too hard. The last thing you want to do is this go wee, and the wire comes out and you've got no wire in there because you can't get it back in. I have done that. But I'm just trying to even up these ends so I've got about the same amount of wire on both sides. Yeah. Now this is the wire that had the beads on it, the central wire, and I'm just wrapping it around 2 of the wires. Go on, round you go. A few times, and that's going to finish our wire off. It's not quite a cast off edge or anything like that, but it's going to hold it secure. It's not going to go anywhere, so I'll just trim that off. And I press that down with the pliers. And I can just finish the other end off by trimming off. And then press down with the pliers. Okay, let's make this into a nice shape. I can use my fingers and very gradually work this into a circle, or I can use a dowel or a pencil or a pen, probably not that marker pen that I had before, so I've got a paintbrush here. You'd be amazed at the totally obscure things I have on my workbench to use. So that's a nice curve. I like that. Now then, if I take the wires and I bend them out ever so slightly, when I bring these together, and I get that shape right, there we go. You can see now that my wires at the top sit nicely. So I have 2 at the front, 2 at the back. These are quite malleable. You can get hold of these and you can wiggle these around into lots of different configurations of how you would like your wires and how you'd like them to fasten together and how you want to weave your bail. You could have them all open and go in between all of them. I'm not going to do that. Taking one of my wires, I'm going to wrap a couple of times around 2 of the wires and then a figure of 8 movement, so in between through the middle and then up and round the other pair of wires, pushing the wire down with my thumb, round again, round through the middle, down, round the other one and again and through the middle, just doing a nice figure of 8. But I'm encompassing both wires while I do that. I'm not going to go up and down in between all 4, which you could if you wanted. And I'm just going to slide that down with my pliers, keeping it nice and tight. Now stick together you two, that's it, round that one. 2. Sometimes forget where I am, especially when I've got my hands forward and underneath the camera. You can't always see quite as easily. Let me move those out of the way and you can see a little better. So round and back and round that one. Figure of 8 to the other side. 1, 2, back through the middle to the other one. Once I've got the width that I want my bail to be, which is not super wide because it's not a really large pendant, you always have to take into consideration balance. I'm just going to bring those wires in so that they become parallel instead of them continuing to go outwards. And then I'm going to continue my weaving exactly the same way, wrapping around twice and then through the middle and to the other side. 1, 2, through the middle. And I'll keep going for a little way. We don't have a huge amount of wire here, but you have help if I could talk, wouldn't it? Perfectly sufficient to create bails, which is what we're doing. So keep going a little bit more around the wires. Get in there. The reason I brought the wires parallel rather than taking them back in is I find that when I'm going on a downward slope, my weaving tends to slip and move. So if I come out a little bit and then go parallel, I find it easier to do. If you like the way that the bail actually looks going out and coming back in, by all means, do it that way. I quite like it like this. Make sure it stays pushed down. I am running out of wire for binding around. If I wanted to put any more on, it would be quite easy. I would just wrap around a couple of times, add my new piece in, and then keep going. But I think I'm going to have enough, so I'm just wrapping around the wire a couple of times. Because it's so short, I've actually gone between those wires, so it's just wrapped in between them, which will just give it a little bit of extra strength because it's between those two. And I'll just press that nice and smooth to the wires and press them down. Okay, so we have a frame, we have a bail made, and we have a nice long wire remaining which we're going to fasten our briolette in. If you were going to put 2 or 3 beads that were going to hang downwards, I would put them on a separate piece of wire and then bring your wire to the top with a little loop in and then pass this wire through that loop. That way you'll get a nice bit of movement. But I'm going to pop my briolette onto that wire. So just get the end of the wire and pop it through the little tiny hole at the top. And they often are very, very tiny, these holes. There is a hole. I'm sure there's a... It helps if you take out the piece of cord that they were on when you bought them. That does make it easier for getting the wire through. So we'll slide that down so that it sits nicely, and my wire goes to the other side. And I can just pass that through the back and wrap around. So it's going around the 2 wires at the back. Once through is perfectly enough. If you've got a larger hole in your briolette, you could go backwards and forwards through that a couple of times, but like I said, these are quite tiny. Now I don't need any more, and I can fold my bales over. So round nose pliers onto the middle of my weaving, and I'm just going to bring all that down forward. There we go. Lovely, cute little bales. I still have this wire, and I'm going to pass that under and over the wires that I've just stitched down there, so they will hold those down and stop it springing out and bending upwards. So just through the middle there. It literally is like stitching. You are stitching those wires in place and pulling them nice and tight and wrapping around. By wrapping over those 2 wires, you're also stopping the weaving wire from moving. It's putting like a stop onto it there. Now I have 2 little wires. I'm going to take the inner of the 2 wires and I'm going to bend them back up the bale. This does 2 things. A, it looks quite pretty. Just tighten that one up a little bit. It's a bit more pull. There we go. It looks quite pretty. But again, it stops the weaving on the bale moving at all. I'm going to finish this off by tucking the ends underneath into the back of the bale. So once I've got them in a position where I like them, I think that needs to move. There we go. That's a bit too long. So I'm going to take my snips and just cut it off. And then take my pliers and bend it around and into the back of the bale. Go on, in you go. And press it down. Don't pull too tight because you don't want to pull that little curl out. Just get it in. What it will actually do is it will go beyond those 2 wires that we created our bale around and sort of tuck inwards. You won't see the end because it's curled over the top. So I'm just going to trim the other side and do the same. So it's not going to catch on anything. You'll be able to put either a chain through there or a thong or a ribbon or anything like that, and it's not going to catch. Now I have 2 little wires, one there and one there. So I think I'll make tiny little weeny curls. So let's cut half of this off. Same on that side. And then round nose pliers, where have I put them? There they are. Grip the end and curl those inwards. So you sort of mirror in the one that's above. You've got one going up the bale, and then you've got 2 little tiny curls at the bottom of the bale. There we go. Lovely. Just get these tight. Don't want any little ends poking out. I don't like little ends. I find it's guaranteed they'll catch on a sweater or a jumper or a silk blouse. And so now I have 2 more wires. Really, they're not doing anything structural, aren't these wires at all? They are purely there for fancy. You could put a tiny curl in this and stop it, you know, and say that's it, I've done enough, don't want any more. You could possibly add a couple of beads to it and then finish it off. But I've just done a little curl that's going to come out, and I'm going to finish it off much like I did with the bells. I'm supporting the curl that I put in with my non-dominant hand, and I'm holding it all straight. My right hand, I'm using the pliers to bring that wire around the back and tuck it in. Same on this side. Pliers on the edge, left hand supporting the wire so I don't pull that curve out, and just fasten it in place. That's quite sweet. Just give it a wriggle. Now, 2 more wires. What shall I do with them? Right, so let's do a curve that follows the one we've already got. So I'm curving it. Oops, come here. Sort of around. That's quite nice. Lots of fiddling. Like I said earlier, I will wriggle with this and rearrange it until I get it just about even. Symmetry. Well, I know a lot of people are very, very good at symmetry. Me, not so much. I've trimmed that end down, and I'm just going to make that now into a little tiny tight curl, which I'm closing up with my pliers. And I'm going to do the same on the other side, trimming that down. Come here, pliers. Curling that round. You don't want too much. It's quite a little pendant. If you get too fussy, you're going to overbalance it. There's going to be too much heaviness at this top edge. So little curls are neat, tucked in with no sticky out ends are definitely what we want. Give that a wriggle. If I need it, I still have a piece of this fine wire that, as you can see, is waggling around. And I could use that to fasten those wires in place, but I don't think they need them. They're quite secure. So I'm just going to go through the back. Come on. Find a hole. Go through. There you go. And pull that tight. And wrap it around. Pass it through again just to make sure that it really, really is not going to go anywhere. And then I'll trim that off and smooth the end down. There we go. Very pretty. Can be used for so many different things. Doesn't matter the shape of your bead or the briolette or a row of beads, whatever you're using, it really doesn't matter. They can be any shape and size. And what you're doing is you're adding an extra dimension by having the beads around the edge, because you've got interest from the side as well as from the front. There we go. So all done and dusted on a silk thread ready to wear. I really hope you enjoy watching that one. Thank you. Happy wrapping.